10 seconds to target. Here we go. Lee's back at you today with another quick update from the Wall Street Journal, the world's best newspaper in my estimation, and least biased, with great articles that cover a gamut. You'll see today a gamut of articles that cover the world. Many people think it covers New York City and the financial district, and that's the farthest from the truth. But it's a great newspaper. I hope you read it. Not a cheap one. I think subscription right now is about $500 a year for a physical newspaper delivered to your door every day. I think you can get the electronic one for, don't quote me, $200 to $300. I think I still like the physical paper. By the way, I'm old school. I love taking a pen and going through the actual paper, spread it out, and circle the articles that I find interesting and go back and summarize them. So, kind of an old school person. One of these days, maybe the financial issue is going to get me to look at it from a different perspective on digital. But I do find that with digital, I tend to skip around a lot, and I'm not sure that I've read the whole paper. Does that make sense to you? Hope it does. So just I think 5 articles today. First of all, new Series 6 Apple Watch, more and more stuff coming out. And they did, so one of the Wall Street Journal tech writers has done a review and actually has the watch on her wrist and wore it and looked at it. And she says, look, the real difference in the levels, the Series 6 watch is the oxygen level. So she found that the oxygen level on her wrist was not consistent. And Apple came back and said, they are finding that on certain wrists, certain bands, if it's not tight enough, it doesn't work as reliable. So the 2 issues, where it's worn on the wrist and how tight the band is. So a significant thing she found out was that there's no alert on oxygen level below a certain threshold. And so Apple is marketing this as a wellness and fitness feature. It's not a health feature, okay? So it's interesting because many people, because of the heart thing that there was an alert process on that one. There is not an alert one on this one. So you've got to look at it on occasion to see if you're dipping below that 90%, whatever threshold. I would use 90%, but whatever threshold used. By the way, she did say that the new Solo straps that come with the new watches, and by the way, you can buy them independently. Obviously, the Apple Watches have universal watch fittings other than the width. They're wonderful. That they really fit really well and they're easy to use. So you might want to look at them when the Apple stores open back up. I don't think they've opened. Somebody let me know if you know different than that. One of the things I heard the other day is one of the reasons Apple's having trouble selling watches right now is that's kind of a personal buy where you want to go in and look how the size looks on your wrist and which color looks best and so on, So whereas, ordering an iPhone, iPad, Apple Air over the internet's a lot easier. EU is having the same problem the States is having, is that SUVs are very popular. They're now 40% of European auto sales. And Europeans love cars, traditional, cars, and a lot of small cars, but they're finding that the SUVs are very popular, just like in the U.S., though that number is higher in the U.S. So it's making the mission target much more difficult. EU has a mission target this year, and they're giving them 1 year leeway. It's kind of complicated, but their mission target is 95 grams of carbon dioxide. And right now, only 27% of the autos meet that target. As an automaker, Peugeot is the closest to that, and they're I think around a little over 100, right in the 100 area. So And by the way, electrics are only 4.3% of the market, so that they really haven't made quite an inroad. That's gone up less than 2 times in the last 5 years. So EU is not going to make their emission target. I think we all know that, and I think they all know that. And we'll see what they do to get around that. But right now, they're not going to make that target. So, interesting article about a guy that was bored during the COVID lockdown and decided to check random digits. This is an odd thing, but so let me pull up. So there actually is a book, and it's been around since a little before I was born, 47, 48. And it's called The Book of Random Digits. I think you can see it here. By the way, the hardcover is about $440 if you can buy one. A lot of them sell for over $600. There's no paperbacks that I could see that are even available right now. Interesting enough. I don't know. It probably is not in print anymore. I can't imagine it being in print. So you got to find a used copy somewhere that somebody's willing to give up. If I had one, I wouldn't sell it, even for $400. It's a neat book, but only for an engineering nerd like me. So you can see that the content is really dull. This is exactly what every page looks like. And, if I could page through this thing, you'd see that it's just a table of random digits, random numbers, but that we would usually call them digits. And so, so this gentleman just took it upon himself, said, I wonder if anybody really ever checked them. And when he went back through the book, if you look in the table of contents, in the forward, they were checked minimally. And I think it was a random checking, which makes sense, right? This is why you use random numbers. We'll get into that. And so it was checked, but not thoroughly. And so this guy checked every single number and found there was some bias. And that means that the random digits were off some in certain ranges and in certain parts of the book, by the way. Okay, so what's interesting is the way this was created. It's very complicated, hard to describe in a podcast, but it was used with electronic circuit, making pulses and counting those pulses. But then that was put into an IBM mainframe and put onto paper cards, punch cards. We call them Hollerith cards is the technical name, but they're usually an 80-column card, 5-6 inches wide, 2.5 inches tall, I think. I used to work on card punch machines and card readers that read them. And so they would have had this huge decks and decks of cards, boxes and boxes of cards that represented each one of these numbers. And so he never found out. Interesting enough, on these punch cards, they can be 56, they can be an 80 card, a column card, or I think there's something around a 72. Somebody in my computer nerds will correct me, but there's 3 different varieties. He never knew what they originally used back then, so he did some simulations to try to figure out, because he wanted to know how this happened. And sure enough, he found out that in one of these combinations of cards, he found that the cards were out of order. And the way he proved that is with which numbers were wrong, and which introduced a bias to the random number generator. And so it's obvious to those of us that lived that era is that somebody dropped the deck of cards, and when they put them back together, they put them back out of order. Those of that lived that era back there, we know how many cards are dropped. They were slippery. You had to hold great big handfuls of them, and they were easy to slip and get mispositioned. So makes sense, but interesting story, I thought. So how do we use random numbers? There's a million ways we use random numbers that most people don't think of. For instance, you had a rusty bridge and you want to inspect welds. So you don't inspect every single weld. Usually you don't do that. So you pick a random number of welds, and you may number these welds and use a numbering system. And then after you number them, you go to the random number table and determine Um, you determine which ones of those you're going to inspect based on the fact that they came up in the random number generator. Okay, you assign each well the number, and then you look for the random number generation. You look for which numbers come up, and those are the wells you're going to go inspect. Submarine captain used them for a unpredictable course that the submarine was going to take. Okay, great use of random number generators. I was real impressed with that. Use them. The casinos use them, by the way, all the time. 52 cards, blackjack, everything use a random number generators, and you have to be very careful of it because if there's any bias in it, you lose money. The house loses money, and we know the house does never wants money. So I remember playing with them originally in basic programs. I try to remember what the basic command for RND or for the random number, and I've forgotten. But I remember doing that on a Commodore 64. Those of you that remember back in the early 70s, late 70s, maybe late 70s. And it had a bias, by the way. And I used it for a game that I was making, a color matching game for kids on the Commodore 64. And there was a slight bias in it. It didn't affect a game that I was working on, so I ignored it. But you couldn't get around it because of the limitations of BASIC at that time. But so random numbers are real important. And of course, computers have taken this all over. That's why the book is out of print. By the way, they went back to the company called Rand. Many of you figure, Rand was a huge company back in the early days, working on lots of advanced things, military things, and so on. And they produced the book, by the way, R-A-N-D, Rand. And they went back to Rand and said, we haven't heard of anybody that's opened that book in years. So they were not even interested in fixing the book because computers have taken this over. And by the way, you can find on the internet, if you want to generate a random number, go in and go look for it in Google, and you'll find a random number generator that has very low bias. So let me hide that. You're tired of looking at random numbers, I hope. So Democrats hold abortion rights hostage. So I wanted you to think about this a little bit because this is not, people don't think about this. And that's the whole purpose of my talk, my bringing up the Wall Street Journal articles is I want you to think about some of the things outside of maybe a political view and maybe figure out, is it political or is it not? So if you look at the street talk right now, the Democrats will tell you this, that if the Republicans win on the Supreme Court, this is the end of legal abortion. So, well, that may be true. I don't know if, they already hold a majority, except for the chief. He's gone back and forth. He's a Republican appointed. And by the way, there's a good lesson for you there. There's lots of Republican, supposedly right-leaning justices that were appointed that have gone left on a number of issues. But anyways, so, but the question you got to ask is, why are we leaving this up to the court? Okay. So few other countries rely on the judiciary to protect the right to an abortion. They legislate, okay? Why haven't we legislated? And you're saying, aha, why haven't we? I mean, why wouldn't the House pass abortion legislation? If it's the most important thing, it's on their plank, by the way. It's clearly on their 100-page or 87-page plank, whatever you look at it, Democratic platform. They want unrestricted abortion. So why wouldn't they pass legislation? By the way, why didn't they do it in '92 when they had the presidency in both houses? Why didn't they do it in 2008 when they had the presidency in both houses? Fix this once for all. Get it out of the Supreme Court and stop this nonsense of threatening us about the court. So then you got to ask, are they using it to pull in money and votes? because they scare you, right? This is a scare tactic. You got to vote Democratic because you got to make sure that we put somebody in the court that protects abortion rights, women's rights, right? They don't talk abortion rights. They talk women's rights to do with her body what she wants to. And so and by the way, Roe versus Wade already fails to guarantee an access to an abortion. You may not know it, but there's 6 states that right now only have 1 clinic in the entire state. So the right to an access of an abortion right now is limited many places in the country. South Dakota, North Dakota, Virginia. I'm trying to think different states, but very difficult in large swaths of the land to get an abortion these days. And Roe versus Wade in the Supreme Court has nothing to do with that right now. So based on their previous rulings. So the next time your Democratic candidate talks to you about abortion rights and scares you about electing a Republican president that will do away with these rights, ask them, would they sponsor or vote for abortion legislation? Okay, ask them just clearly, how about you sponsoring abortion legislation? Put it before the legislative bodies, by the way, where it should be. Okay, this shouldn't go to the court, right? Because there's almost no laws around it. So then we have to make up reasons about when does life begin and so on. Let's legislate this and get it over with. Or ask them, do you want to keep scaring me so that you'll get my money and my vote? And trust me, it's interesting. Social media can't figure out if I'm a conservative or liberal. They really can't. And all my friends get one or the other emails about upcoming votes. I get both. Kamala emails me. Joe Biden personally emails. Trump, has special invitations to me. They all, and I see the abortion scare emails. And it's, if you let this guy in, he will put this kind of Supreme Court justice in, and we will lose abortion, all abortion, period. And it's a scare tactic. Go legislate. Do what we paid you to do. We voted you in to go legislate, and you're not doing it. And this is a problem with America where in my mind, we have to be careful with leaving things to the administrative state, and I'll talk about that some days. We're making these huge administrative functions that develop rules. I call them laws, but they call them rules for good reasons because they're not legislated. They didn't go through the nasty process of debate and everything. They're done in back rooms. And then the other thing is we're leaving way too much stuff to the courts because we can't legislate. Last article today. Hope you enjoyed that. College COVID scare. So a report recently came out that they said they looked at the date that the colleges reopened, looked at where the colleges were located, and looked at the number of COVID cases and the increase or decrease that was happening in each one of those locations, and determined that after colleges reopened, there were additional 3,200 cases per day that they attributed directly to colleges reopening. And by the way, that's 7% of the daily total cases in the U.S. So not huge, but the title of the article is colleges opening, 3,200 cases per day. Oh my goodness, run in circles. So you got to ask yourself, okay, is this the end of civilization, or should we not even care at all? By the way, most colleges test every weekly, so lots of tests going on. And some, by the way, daily. Hard to believe, but they do. So interesting question you have to ask is, how many are hospitalized? 0. Not a 1. We haven't heard of one hospitalized college student yet. So they're getting it. They're asymptomatic generally, okay? And we're not even sure how well they spread it, but they're only spreading it to other healthy 18 to 22-year-old kids, right? And they're not going to the hospital. So it's no reason to panic. In fact, being one of the older people at the at-risk group and with having comorbidities that make me more at risk, what I want to say is colleges, you keep them there. Don't send them home at Thanksgiving. We don't want them. The safest place for them to be is with other young, healthy people who aren't going to the hospital and aren't getting sick and aren't getting symptoms. They're isolated among young, healthy people. Don't send them home to hug and kiss grandpa and grandma. Please keep them there. We love them, but keep them there. And I've got 3 in college right now, in Illinois, Nashville, and Waco. And I'd love to see them. And great kids, but I think the safest place is among their own kind and not going to the hospital and not getting grandpa sick. So that's my report for today. Hope you enjoyed it. Appreciate your feedback. And I will see you Saturday for a special report, a different kind of paper on Saturday, but sometimes very interesting. Hard for me to get down to 7 to 8 articles. But hope you enjoyed today. Hope you enjoyed random numbers. Hope you enjoyed learning a little bit new for some of you around random numbers. Cheers. Take care.